So today I'm going to share with you some of the books that I found useful over the years. And I'm going to start out with the reference books, the books that I don't necessarily read all the way through, but that I just kind of go to find information that covers a certain category or concept. And the first one is Tarot Correspondences by T. Susan Chang. This is a popular book, but it's popular for a reason. I think that the tables and the different charts that this book has are very helpful at just extracting a lot of information and putting it in a couple of pages so you can easily reference it. I think that this book does a great job of connecting the Kabbalistic tree of life, astrology, mythology, numbers, colors, anything you can imagine. This book might have it. And I find that that's very useful. So if it's something obscure that I'm wondering about or pondering, I often go and I look at this to see if I can find some connection. Another thing about this book is it doesn't have an index. So I do have the hard copy, but I also have the Kindle version of this book because I can just type in a keyword and I can see where it appears in this, and I can find all the places where it's mentioned and put that information together and form an overall picture. So that works really well for me. So whichever way you use it, however you want to use it to study, one might be better than the other, but I don't think you can go wrong with having this in your collection. The next one, also by T. Susan Chang and by M.M. Moline, is Tarot Deciphered. I think that this one is good because it has the information about a specific card and it keeps it all in within a few pages or so. So you can just kind of read that straight through and you're not having to really jump around too much. The book is very cohesive and it gives you a good understanding of how different systems relate. So for example, if you're wondering how something plays out in the Thoth system versus the RWS, I think that this is very good at synthesizing those things and fusing them together. So the next category we're going to go into is books on tarot and astrology, or even on numerology, things like that, Kabbalistic tree of life, that are more specific, that are looking at it from that specific lens. And the first one is Tarot and Astrology by Corinne Kerner. Is it Kenner? I think it's Kenner. Corinne Kenner. That one is, I think, invaluable because of the minor arcana. I think that we are, in a way, more exposed to how astrology relates to the major arcana, but I like that this book goes into detail about the minors as well and how the planets are working together within those cards. So this one, for that reason, I think adds to a richness of your overall understanding, and not just to your overall understanding of the cards, but to the foundation or the fabric in which the cards are built on. And you can see where this energy is coming from. The next one is A Beginner's Guide to Constructing the Universe, The Mathematical Archetypes of Nature, Art, and Science by Michael S. Snyder. This one is good because it shows you how those numbers play out in the physical world in terms of nature, geometry, even symbolism and writing or historical information that you might find within a civilization, where the background comes from and why we say the things we say in regards to these numbers and shapes and where this stuff comes from. And that helps you to kind of see the energy of the card when you see that symbol on the card. So if you see a square on a card, this might help you understand, okay, I understand where that square is coming from now and why this particular image is so blocked off in terms of that. I was talking about the devil card in my last video and how there was a square there and how it relates to the physical world. And I learned about that from this book, but specifically there's been other things in other cards that I've talked about that have come from this as well. Different phrases that we say, just ways to build your information about numbers, specifically the numbers 1 through 10 and how they relate to different cards. The next one is The Only Astrology Book You'll Ever Need by Joanna Woolfolk. Now, this one I've had for a long time. I like this one because it just goes beyond the typical information about your signs and what those mean. It's very clear, easy to understand, but also it blends a lot of the things on your birth chart so you can see how they relate to each other. So how does your sun sign relate to your ascendant and your not your rising, but your moon, and how they're interacting, how they interact within the houses, how the planets are involved. And it does it in a clear way. A lot of books get a little bit too complex when they start to get into that, but this book, I find, breaks it down in a way that I think that will give you that foundation that you need. So I love this one. It's not the only astrology book that I think you'll ever need. I have another one here. This one's The Secret Language of Astrology. This one doesn't give you as much detail as the book that I just mentioned, but it's a beautiful book. So if you want something that you can just put on your table, that's relaxing, that can be a conversational piece, that has just some beautiful images that kind of stay with you and give you the background of that sign encapsulated in a beautiful display, a very artistic and aesthetic style, I think this book works. A couple other books, some books I do have just on my Kindle. One of the books, Tarot for Yourself by Demetri George and Douglas Block. That one's really good because it's a workbook. So if you really want to have the information stick, I know for me, writing stuff down, journaling about it, it gives you prompts for all that stuff. And it's not just going to teach you about your sign. It'll teach you about all the different signs. And I think a very good, fun way to just have an overall body of work that you've written at the end. And you just keep that stuff and collect it together. And then you can really have something more specific just for you. It's almost like creating your own little book about yourself with this as a blueprint. So I really like that for that. I think that this is a book that I've given away a couple of times on my channel because I thought it's just such a great book to have in someone's library. What else? Okay, so another one is Unlocking Cabala, a new synthesis of astrology, tarot, and the Tree of Life by Thomas Weems. This one I think is great because it talks about the different pathways on the Kabbalistic Tree of Life and what card connects those pathways and what that connection means. So if you want to understand, the Tree of Life from a tarot perspective, I think this really is helpful because it breaks down what those different Sephiroth mean, what that pathway means, and how it's connecting those two things. So just a great book that does that in a very user-friendly way, very approachable. It doesn't get, too academic or too complex. And I like it for that. Another book that I think is important. Actually, I'm going to move on to another category, which are the books on the Thoth system. So I have several books on the Thoth system. Of course, I have Aleister Crowley's Book of Thoth, which is very poetic in nature. It's very dense, and it's a little bit more of a book that you have to let sit with you, digest for a while, and then things kind of come into a clearer understanding a little bit later. But I think that it's still something that everyone should have and reference and just read through to get a sort of a idea of where Aleister Crowley was coming from, even if you don't understand everything that he wrote in there. I think to go along with that is Understanding Aleister Crowley's Thoth Tarot by Lon Milo Duquette. That one is a much more clear version of the Book of Thoth. I think that it just kind of takes those things and just extrapolates all of that out and gives you a much more clear, concise, organized presentation. So I recommend that one. The next one is Secrets of the Thoth Tarot by Marcus Katz. That one is similar to what Lon Duquette did, where it makes it a lot more approachable and breaks down all the cards in different sections. There's two books of this one, book 1 and book 2. Both of them I recommend. I use them often when I'm looking at a card and I want to just dive deeper into that meaning and the Thoth system. So the Thoth system, it's very rich, very dense, but these books, I think, bring all of that out and help you to just get away from all of the complex symbolism and to narrow that stuff down in a way that's very friendly. So let's talk about a couple of guidebooks. There are 2 guidebooks that I really like. The first one is from Navigators, Tarot of the Mystic Sea by Julia A. Turk. I like this one because it really matches the imagery. Like, I can understand, like, when I read what she wrote in here and how she tried to infuse things like Buddhism, the Kabbalistic tree of life, even some Gnostic thought in here. I think that all those things really do come out in the cards. And this book comes separate from the deck. And I don't know if a lot of people have purchased it, but I'm glad I did, because it really does add to that deck in a way that complements it so that you can see what she's doing. Even though I could look at those cards and my mind was understanding it in terms of the things that she talks about in this book, you know, Buddhism, Kabbalistic tree of life, Gnosticism, all those things were coming out in the cards. And I was like, is she really connecting these things to that? And then when I read the book, I realized, yeah, you know, it came out so well that I didn't even have to read some of these pages to really get what she was trying to say. So just a perfect example of a great guidebook. And yeah, so I wasn't sure, but I'm glad I got that one. Another one that I'm glad I got that I wasn't sure if I was going to get with the deck was Cabala and Tarot of the Spirit by Pamela Akins. And this one is excellent written. You know, I love that both of these have like a very poetic approach at first, but then they have different parts of the writing that are more clear and kind of explain in detail what the card means. So same thing here. You have some things that give you some beautiful language, some beautiful writing that it sits within you internally, that can really kind of transform your inner world in a way that is, I think, a little bit magical, right? It's a little bit different from just reading words. It works with you in a way. And I find that this book works really well for that. This is books 1, 2, and 3. So that's why this is much thicker. It's a black and white edition. So yeah. Let's talk about some of the more occult-like books, or books that deal with things that a little bit more historical in nature. The Gnostic Religion, A Message of the Alien God. The Beginnings of Christianity by Hans Jonas. And this one looks at Gnosticism through the lens of the different approaches to Gnosticism and kind of the different explanations of how the world came about, and what are the things that contrast or the things that compare within these different approaches to Gnosticism. But it does a great job of doing that. And it really helped me understand what Gnosticism was all about, where it came from. It starts out where it came from and how it was kind of blended into like the Hellenistic world, and then, you know, how it's now been extracted out and becomes a part of the religion for the Cathars, and just different pathways that people took based on this information as they went back to what it originally meant. And so that has been something that's been valuable in my tarot practice, because a lot of the images from especially the Thoth system have a Gnostic lean to them. And you can see that in other decks as well. A lot of people infuse that in there. So another book is The Angel in the Abyss by J. Daniel Gunther. And he has another book. It's called The Initiation in the Aeon of the Child. And so all these books are great. I think that they give a good explanation of a lot of the occult information that was kind of shrouded and hidden in a lot of the coded language and things that were more secretive. It really does explore it in a more open way. So this book has helped me to understand a lot of the things that were just obscure and beyond me. I read it and I just draw a blank. But by reading this, I see where they're coming from. It makes it more approachable, more modern, and it kind of makes me feel like this is also for me and not just for some occultist that's within like the OTO or some group out there that's initiating in some secret ritual. But that these things can be understood and used in your life in a practical way that doesn't have to involve something super secretive or complex. So it's been valuable in my life to understand these things, and I'm glad that I've been able to explore it. And that's one of the books that have helped me to kind of do that. So what else? Another one on the occult side of things is Mock Magic by Nima, a guide to self-initiation. Again, this is more of a modern approach to occultism, where you're not trying to decode or cipher a bunch of information, and it just gives you a straightforward introduction into how you can incorporate the concepts, the thoughts and ideas and the mindset of all of these people who were in this field of study into your life in a way that feels like your own, and it feels like it is actually helping you to develop, but in a way that doesn't involve, like I said, getting involved in anything outside of yourself. So I love books like that. So that's why I wanted to mention those. And then the last couple of books I'll mention here are on the science side of things. I have Tarot and Psychology, Spectrums of Possibility by author Rosengarten. And I love that he gives great examples of how he's used tarot in his practice and the different types of psychology and how they might incorporate the use of tarot. But he does a great job of really coming from an academic perspective. Sometimes it can get a bit wordy and dense, but I think overall what he's trying to say does lend itself really well to kind of understanding why this would be used in psychology and how it could be helpful. The next one is The Neuroscience of Tarot, and I can't pronounce the author's name. I'm just going to put it up here on the screen so you can take a look at it. But the foreword's by Mary K. Greer. And I love this book because it not only does it go into the different mental pathways of how you look at an image and process it, but it gives you different activities to do and to journal with to develop the skill of, I guess, incorporating an image into your system to really kind of blank out imagery so that you can form a clean slate, and to break a picture apart into different shapes and components so that you can see patterns that might appear and form a stronger blueprint of that image in your mind. So that really helped me. I'm surprised by some of the activities and how when I closed my eyes and looked at the image again in my mind, in my mind's eye, I felt like I was strengthening that part of it. And so I think that if you're someone that maybe in the past struggled to form mental images, I didn't do that. I could form strong mental images, but I wasn't forming images as strong as I did when I did the activities in this book. So it kind of bumped me up a notch in terms of looking at an image and breaking it down and then trying to understand those pieces in a coherent way. But they're really complex and unique ways of exploring the mind through actual exercises. And so this isn't one of those books that you're going to just sit down and read through. You do have to really put your time into doing the activities. And so it's taken me a little while to get through this one, but I'm enjoying it, and everything's written in a way that is helpful. So yeah, thank you guys for watching this. I am going to do a video on some of the decks that I use in my videos and kind of explaining, what these decks are about, showing you more of the images and just kind of breaking down why I use these specific decks and how they function. So that might be helpful as well. So I'm going to do that also. And so I'll do that very soon. And yeah, so that's where I'm kind of going from here, and just continuing with my regular videos on tarot and the periodic table, and just adding to this channel in a way that I think is useful and helpful to me, and hopefully it's helpful to you. So thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Will. This is Atypical Tarot. I'll see you next time.